This has been a very extraordinarily interesting experience, just sitting here listening to you and to the other members of this House Judiciary Committee, which is one of the most significant committees in this Congress, with one of the greatest elements of responsibility, particularly with regard to doing the job which is of such great importance for all of us, which is to defend and protect the Constitution of the United States. So I deeply appreciate what you've done here today, Mr. Chairman, and all the members of this committee as well, in being here for this particular purpose, to focus attention on this particular issue. We have a main responsibility, as I've said, to protect and defend that Constitution, to maintain the separation of powers, to ensure that we do not have one aspect of this government which dominates all the rest of it. And particularly, we do not have a president who attempts to dominate all of the lawful activities of our nation and completely dominate all the significant decisions that are made. And we've seen that so clearly in the context of this administration. But I think we've seen it also in the context of corruption and incompetence. And I think that this administration has been dominated throughout by those two words, corruption and incompetence. That needs to be addressed. We need to be sure that in the future we have a president who understands his obligations and responsibilities and who lives up to those obligations and responsibilities and who works responsibly with the other two branches of government. And I think with regard to the situation in Iraq and this terrorist operation, which has dominated so much of what this administration has done, the proper kind of attention has to be directed to this situation from the very beginning. And if you look at that situation from the very beginning, one of the things that you see is that 2 months before the election of November 2000, there was a meeting with the President and the intelligence operation, the Director of Intelligence, to inform him about one of the major problems that we had to confront as a nation, which was the fact that Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda was determined to attack the United States. That was a message which was delivered down in Crawford, Texas in September of 2000. Following that, there were more than 40 intelligence briefings delivered to the top levels of this administration from January 2001 through September 10th of 2001, including references. All of those briefings included references to al-Qaeda, references to bin Laden, and the fact that they were determined to engage in various forms of attack. The most prominent one of those PDBs, for example, was the one that was made public, which was delivered on August 6th, which was so obvious, even particularly in its headline, about those facts. The warnings to the White House about Osama bin Laden were extended and consistent and should have promoted actions to prevent the attack of September 11th, but they did not. And why they did not is a major question that we need to be confronting, I believe, as a Congress, particularly here in the House of Representatives. Another example of that is how Richard Clarke sent consistent warnings to the National Security Advisor, Condoleezza Rice, throughout that same period of time in 2001, providing information that should have been adhered to. After the attack of September 11th, we engaged in a direct attack, of course, on the Taliban and al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. And that attack, of course, was very successful. It disrupted the Taliban. It put in a new government in that country. But also it did something else, which is extraordinarily interesting. That military invasion of Afghanistan failed to follow up on bin Laden and allowed him to escape up into the Tora Bora Mountains. And that escape was provided by, most directly, by the Secretary of Defense in his direction to pull our military forces back and not follow up on that attack. And I think that that was clear that the reason for that was that they did not want to capture bin Laden, because if we had captured him, if our military had captured him, it would have been much more difficult for them to attempt to justify an attack against another country which had nothing to do with the attack of September 11th, but which they were attempting to manipulate the intelligence, and did so initially with a certain amount of success, manipulating intelligence to try to show that there was a direct connection between Iraq and the attack of September 11th, which of course there was not. And then they went on to say that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and that those weapons of mass destruction were threatening the safety and security of the United States and other countries, and we should act against that in the form of an invasion. And of course, the information that was given over and over again was that there was no clear evidence, and that information was given by United Nations inspectors, inspectors from the United States, and from the intelligence of the United States. Nevertheless, they chose to ignore all of that. Then the one that got a substantial amount of attention was the warnings that the administration ignored, which included a memo that the National Intelligence Council sent to the White House in January of 2003 that stated that the uranium claim, which this administration was making, that uranium claim was baseless and should be laid to rest. We remember how just prior to that vote in October of 2002, there were those kinds of statements about that uranium claim. And then just prior to the invasion in March of 2003, 2 months prior to that, how numerous statements were being made by members of the administration talking about the potential for nuclear invasion, and saying things, for example, over and over again on a number of occasions. We do not want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud. All of that was designed to manipulate the decision, which was unfortunately made by this Congress, to vote to give the President the authority to engage in some kind of military activity, which he carried out against Iraq. All of those circumstances need to be examined very, very carefully. And they need to be examined because of the terrible damage that all of that has done to the present set of circumstances that we're confronting as a nation, both militarily, internationally, and economically, right here at home. And the danger that it offers and really opens the door for in the future for other presidents to engage in similar kinds of activities, which would put this nation once again not only in physical danger, but in the danger of eliminating the basic provisions of the Constitution of the United States and undermine the democratic principles of our country, which need to be sustained. I think that the situation that we're confronting now is one of the most difficult that we've had in the history of our country. And the word impeachment has been mentioned over and over again by members of the Judiciary Committee on a number of occasions, and again this morning. And I think, frankly, that based upon all of the things that this administration has done, it is probably the most impeachable administration in the history of America because of the ways in which it has clearly violated the law.
I think they get your message.
One of the most clear examples of that is the State of the Union address in January of 2003. In that State of the Union address, the President knew that what he was stating about the nuclear weapons program had been told to him that was false. It was not true. There was no documentation backing it up. And at the last minute, of course, he switched and tried to put the responsibility onto the British. But all of that, of course, was very, very untrue. And the circumstances that we're confronting, I think, have to be dealt with. And I think the responsibility of this committee needs to focus on all of those elements, to examine them carefully, and to see the way in which this administration has behaved, the dangerous set of issues that we need to confront as a result of that behavior, and to engage in actions that are going to try to ensure that the basic democratic principles of our country are not going to be undermined, that they're going to be protected and strengthened with regard to future presidents and future Congresses. And so I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for everything that was said today by the members of this committee and for the opportunity to be here with you.